significant news out of the White House with thousands of Americans. Big news, and we meant it. They're getting federal marijuana convictions wiped off their records. Why President Biden's taking these new steps late today to rethink how the federal government classifies cannabis. Plus, new denials today from Republican Senate candidate Herschel Walker on the campaign trail, for the first time since the story broke, alleging the anti-abortion candidate paid for one. We're live on the ground in Georgia with both him and his Democratic competitor. And the Daily Mail not feeling the love tonight from Elton John or Prince Harry, for that matter, why they're two in a group of pretty ticked-off stars suing the British tabloid for violating their privacy. Plus, in tonight's original, some parents furious with the Florida school district for outsourcing details about when some female student-athletes get their periods. My exclusive one-on-one with a Democratic congresswoman who wants to make a new national standard for how we handle reproductive health care data in this post-Roe world. And in tonight's backstory, we go behind the scenes of an NBC News investigation on what really happens when you're just about to check out of the store and get asked to round up your last few cents for charity. That's later on in the show. Hey, I'm Hallie, and tonight we're starting with that huge announcement on cannabis reform, changes that could affect thousands of people across the country. The president just announcing he's pardoning anyone who's been convicted of simple marijuana possession under federal law. That's about 6,500 Americans. But critically, and the thing that could be a really huge deal, he's also asking governors to do the same for people convicted under state law. That's potentially a lot more people than just 6,500. The president saying sending people to jail for possessing marijuana has upended too many lives. The other big thing he wants to do, have some cabinet members look into how cannabis is classified under federal law and whether it should still be a class 1 drug like heroin or LSD. Supporters of reform say definitely not, with the president pointing out that while white people and black people and brown people all use marijuana at roughly the same rate, black and brown people get arrested more, prosecuted more, convicted more. I spoke with Reverend Al Sharpton just a couple of hours ago about how big of a deal this is, especially for people of color. Your reaction to this news from the White House? Did you see it coming?
I thought it was monumental. The president has, in his meetings with civil rights leaders, talked about this, but this is actually the first president to do it.
White House correspondent Josh Letterman is joining us now. So, Josh, we've laid out here the three main things that the president is doing here. Pardoning people with those federal convictions for simple marijuana possession, asking states to do the same, and then asking the Secretary of HHS, the AG, to rethink the classification schedule here, or at least look at how that's happening. Here's the question, though. Why now, right? What is the timing of this? What's up with this?
Well, the White House says that this is simply a promise that the president made as a candidate and after he was elected to try to make sure that nobody is behind bars simply because they used marijuana, Hallie. But obviously, all of us know what's ahead in a month on the political calendar, which is, of course, the midterm elections. Hanging over any decision the president makes at this point in time clearly has to be viewed in part through the prism of the election. And, of course, Democrats very eager to get their base out to vote. We've seen other moves recently by the president that seemed designed to try to appeal to younger voters, such as canceling some of that student debt. We also know that the president, as he has been out campaigning for Democrats in the midterms, has been getting an earful about marijuana reform, including most notably from Pennsylvania Senate candidate John Fetterman, who has been pushing Biden to decriminalize marijuana. So certainly this is a step the White House has long hinted the president might ultimately take in support of decriminalization, and one that many Democrats hope will really juice up their base as we head into those elections just a month from now.
What else are you hearing from the administration about this? Because the president, as you point out, talked about this on the campaign trail, and this is something that, as we said, would have some real repercussions, especially, you know, by the numbers, 6,500 people getting pardoned for these simple marijuana possession federal convictions. Okay. State, that could be potentially a much bigger number of people. And then the reclassification potentially of marijuana so that it's not a class 1 drug like heroin, for example. I've talked to a lot of people. I did some reporting on this last year, veterans in particular, who suggest, hey, cannabis should be studied, should be allowed to be used as medicinal under federal law if it helps me feel better, especially in some states that are legalizing it for that purpose.
Yeah, that's right. And I think that the way that the White House wants to parse this, Hallie, is to draw a distinction between individuals who have gotten in trouble and gotten convicted simply because they smoked or used marijuana, and people who are engaged in trafficking and selling to minors, in marketing marijuana, in other crimes that are related to marijuana, which the White House says should stay in place. Biden is not the most progressive Democrat among Democrats on this issue. He doesn't support full legalization of marijuana, but both the effort to try to erase these convictions on the federal level, urging the states to do it, but also changing potentially some of the penalties for the use of marijuana through the Controlled Substances Act, speak to the way the administration is trying to say, look, if you're simply someone who is using marijuana, that is not a group of people that this administration believes that should be targeted for law enforcement action, and that is clearly a step that Biden wanted to take.
Real quick, Josh, and just to be clear here, the administration acknowledges that there's nobody right now in federal prison for just this charge, simple marijuana possession. But as you and I have talked about, incarceration is not the only impact of this kind of thing.
That's right. Having a pardon also helps to restore some of your rights and get rid of some of that stigma. Clearly, the aim here is to get governors to take the next step, the much more consequential step of pardoning those crimes at a state level. That could potentially see thousands of people currently incarcerated set free if governors were to follow through on that, Hallie.
And I think over the course of the next X number of days, X number of weeks, that's going to be a big reporting focus. What states are actually going to do that and when? Josh Letterman, thank you so much for starting us off. Down to Georgia now, where Senator Raphael Warnock is speaking now for the first time on the campaign trail today about the newest allegations against his Republican opponent, Herschel Walker, that the woman who told the Daily Beast that Walker, who paid for her abortion in 2009, is also the mother of one of his children. Here's Senator Warnock.
What we are hearing about my opponent is disturbing. And I think the people of Georgia have a real choice about who they think is ready to represent them in the United States Senate.
You know who else was out on the campaign trail today? Herschel Walker, denying the allegations yet again. Listen to some of the back and forth here.
This here, the abortion thing is false. It's a lie. The Democrats are desperate for this seat. This seat is important.
We should note that NBC News has not yet verified the allegations or the documents this woman provided to the Daily Beast, again, with Walker, an anti-abortion candidate, having been reported now to pay for one. And just to talk about the backdrop of why this is so important to you, even if you don't live in Georgia, to anybody in this country who is looking for the Senate to represent them, whatever your political persuasion, look at the map of the Senate as it is right now. It's split 50-50. Democrats have control because Vice President Kamala Harris could break a tie. There are 35 seats up for grabs in the midterms. You see these 10 darker seats in the middle. NBC thinks about those as like the ones that are competitive races, okay? So in order to take back control of the Senate, Republicans would need to win 6 of these seats to take control. That is why Georgia is so critical here. Currently held by a Democrat. Republicans want it back. Democrats need it to hold the Senate. Sahil Kapoor is bringing us in now, is with us now here. And there have been, feels like there were developments every hour on this story today. You had Walker now out in public on the campaign trail for the first time in a fiery way denying these allegations. Our own Yamiche Alcindor asked what he makes of people close to him, like his son Christian, calling him a liar. Talk about the impact this has had on the campaign as you're out with Senator Warnock, who walked up the line today, but didn't outright answer your questions about how he's handling the allegations as part of his campaign strategy.
Well, it's quite an October surprise, Hallie, in what could be the quintessential tipping point Senate race that, as you just point out, based on the math of what we're seeing, could determine control of the chamber. And it certainly has shaken up this race. Raphael Warnock has played this somewhat cautiously. His team views this as a fight between Herschel Walker and the voters of Georgia who might question his own actions. It has raised themes of character, honesty, political hypocrisy for a candidate running on an anti-abortion platform to have done that. And one of the ways it's shaken up this race is it's pivoted the attention off from what Republicans wanted to be a referendum on President Biden and the Democratic-controlled Congress, and it's put the focus squarely on Herschel Walker. Yes, his personal past and his flaws have been widely known, but this kind of takes that to a new level. It puts him in the hot seat. It forces him to have to defend what he did, in this case, flatly deny what he did. And meanwhile, Raphael Warnock is sticking to his stump speech. He spoke right behind me not very long ago. And he talked about infrastructure. He talked about his own path, someone who was born in this city of Savannah to pastors and became the first African-American to serve Georgia in the U.S. Senate. So Warnock sticking to his message and letting Walker try to figure this out on his own.
The question is, what happens now from here, especially when it comes to voters? How do they feel about it? Because even a little bit of a swing in this race could make a difference. And you know, it's a tough question to answer. It's not like we have polling right now that shows how people in Georgia feel about this race since these allegations came out.
That's exactly right. This is a very divided state. This state, of course, went for President Biden by fewer than 12,000 votes. It elected Senator Warnock and Senator John Ossoff, the other Democrat, in 2020 by a margin of 2 points or less. So even a tiny swing in this race, not even percentages of points, but even thousands of votes, tens of thousands of votes in Georgia could have a monumental impact and decide, who wins this state. And, if the election ends up being as close as some of the forecasts suggest, decide control of the chamber again. So this is a matter for voters to decide. It is less likely than it might have been maybe 10 years ago or 20 years ago for a scandal like this to torpedo a candidacy, given the spate of negative partisanship, the fact that Republicans just want Republicans to keep the chamber, and vice versa for Democrats in the flip side case. Hallie.
Sahil Kapoor, thank you. Further south now, NBC News can now confirm Hurricane Ian, which slammed the coast of the Carolinas and, of course, southwest Florida, has killed 131 people, with today some folks finally getting a chance to see just how bad the damage was to their houses after the storm basically cut off access to a couple of islands off the coast of Florida. A lot of people have been using boats. You see that here, like on Sanibel Island. But not too long ago, just late this afternoon, you see it here, the first cars are getting back onto Pine Island with this temporary bridge, letting people who might have left see what needs to be done to rebuild. And it's probably going to be a lot. I mean, look at it. Trees down, power lines down, etc. Our Jesse Kirsch was one of the first people onto the island today. Here's who we talked to.
We're still, obviously just finishing up search and rescue stuff. But our main purpose here is just to outreach to the community, run our supply chain of what the grocery stores can't get these people.
Shaq Brewster is in Fort Myers for us. And Shaq, this is a significant step forward in the rebuilding process, but it is only an early step, one of the first steps.
It's an early step, and in some ways, Hallie, it's a late step for the rebuilding. The fact that people are just getting to Pine Island, residents are just getting back. It's the first time that many of them are able to see the damage that their home went under with this hurricane. This is the first time that they're able to pull out the debris, put it on the curb. We're hearing from Jesse that power lines are down. So that's something that you don't see as much on the mainland, especially here in Fort Myers Beach and Fort Myers, Florida, as power crews have been able to stand up those power lines and bring back and restore power to so many people. But for Pine Island and many of those barrier islands where they're just getting access or just talking about getting regular access, it's going to be a long way until they're able to even start their recovery in those areas, Hallie.
I know you're talking with one marina owner who didn't have insurance on his docks because it was too expensive. He basically says this is like, if not the absolute worst case scenario, pretty darn close to it.
Absolutely, and this is on Fort Myers Beach. You see some of the damage behind me, but you literally have boats under docks, docks on top of boats. A dock actually smashed into the building, the marina, where there was a restaurant that was once housed. He said that clearing it up is going to be like untangling a bowl of spaghetti. And, you just get a sense of how daunting the task is for him, this business owner who also has damage at his personal home. So I wanted to share a little bit of the conversation that we had.
I tell people I'm in my second hurricane now, just trying to get through all the debris, and it's hard. Yeah, and trying to figure out how we're going to rebuild.
So you see that emotion in him. He had to do this before. Feels like he had to do it again. One interesting thing is that he said that someone came up to him and said that one of the boats in this mangled mess at the marina that is fully submerged, they said that they were told that someone was riding out the storm in one of those boats. He called officials to have them send a dive team here. That dive team still hasn't showed up yet. So you get a sense, obviously that's unconfirmed. He doesn't know what's down there, but you get a sense of how and why that death toll continues to rise. There are so many areas like this that rescue workers just haven't been able to search and really recover everyone missing from this storm.
Even now, a week later, Shaquille Brewster. Shaq, thank you very much, live for us there in Florida. Tonight, the world wants to know why North Korea is escalating its weapons program right now with these new moves that are making the U.S. worried enough to start its own defense exercises as a signal back. We just heard from the Pentagon on why they think it's serious enough to send an aircraft carrier into the Sea of Japan. Watch.
These exercises send a clear message of allied unity between our nations and enhance the interoperability of our collective forces. We consider this behavior destabilizing, unhelpful, and irresponsible.
So this is that ship. We're going to show it to you here. The USS Ronald Reagan, traveling with ships from South Korea, working together on defense tests because of those launches on Tuesday that caused alarms to basically go off in Japan. But instead of ratcheting down, North Korea ratcheted up, and that's part of the playbook here. Escalate, provoke, cool down, rinse, repeat. Okay? Overnight, North Korea responded by firing 2 missiles in Japan's direction. You can see it here as the country accuses the U.S. of seriously threatening stability in the region. There's no cool down yet, right, in this cycle, because now North Korea is flying a dozen fighter jets near the DMZ, the demilitarized zone. So as you can see here, South Korea is responding by sending up 30 of their own. Japan's prime minister says these launches absolutely cannot be tolerated. 24 so far, just this year from North Korea. But we don't know what comes next. That's not super clear. Why? Because the United Nations typically dismisses this. China and Russia side with North Korea. They're doing so in this latest back and forth. All of it leading to the big question here. What does Kim Jong-un want? What does he want right now? Why is this happening? And when might things cool down? Andrea Mitchell is joining us now, our chief foreign affairs correspondent. And Andrea, those are some big questions. We don't know the answers to them. It's the first action we've seen from North Korea like this in 5 years. Again, with understanding that there's no good answer, what are experts telling you about why now?
Well, as you know, North Korea is one of the hardest intelligence targets that we've got, and we don't know why he does certain things. There is speculation he wants attention because all the attention that the U.S. is paying is to Ukraine, the war in Europe, the war against Russia, NATO against, well, virtually against Russia, but in support of Ukraine. So that is one theory, but more likely, he is responding to the first U.S. exercises in 5 years. President Trump had canceled those exercises with no notice to his own Pentagon during this first summit with Kim Jong-un. Precipitously, they hadn't been held for 5 years. Now they were being held, and almost immediately these missiles are launched. But actually, the tempo of missile launches this year has been pretty astounding. He has been repeatedly launching missiles, and now 6 in just the last couple of days. And in that tempo, the Reagan was redeployed. The U.S. did more joint exercises. The UN held a Security Council meeting at the U.S. request, and most everyone sided with the U.S. against North Korea, except, of course, China and Russia. China and Russia and North Korea arguing that the U.S. had provoked this crisis, not North Korea. So you've had a tit for tat. Alarming, though, the scrambling of the North Korean jets, the fighter jets and the bombers overnight, that really did get everyone's attention. It was very close to the South Korea border. South Korea responding with 30 fighter jets of their own. And one really serious question is whether or not the construction that is seen at Pyongyang, a site that was seen by satellite just in the last 24, 48 hours, a commercial satellite. That site has had continuous construction on underground tunnels, and that could be preparation for an underground nuclear test. That would also be the first in 5 years, and that would get everyone's attention. Most likely not happening until after China holds its big, its re-nomination, re-election of President Xi next week.
Bottom line, Andrea, and sort of real quick, because there's not much to say about it, the options for diplomacy here are pretty limited for the U.S., is the bottom line.
Well, President Biden and his team have been sending letters, pleas almost, to Kim Jong-un, let's talk, and nothing, crickets. So they haven't lifted sanctions, and now China and Russia have said there will be no more sanctions. They will veto anything that comes out of the UN.
Andrea Mitchell, thank you for that. We'll look for more of your coverage tonight on Nightly News. Appreciate it. To an NBC News exclusive interview now with the head of USAID, Samantha Power, announcing more money, $55 million, to help Ukraine get ready for winter. In Kyiv, she talked about how U.S. support is going towards heating up homes and schools there, with the war still going strong. Again, winter is cold. You need people to be warm. in this interview, just to underscore how active the war still is. You could even hear an explosion go off as our Cal Perry was speaking with her. Watch.
We have provided now more than $25 billion in a combination of military security assistance that everybody's familiar with, also direct budget support, $8.5 billion of direct budget support.
Also in Kyiv today, President Zelensky, the Ukrainian president, meeting with the head of the UN nuclear agency, saying they consider the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant to be a Ukrainian facility, a day after Russian President Vladimir Putin says it actually belongs to Moscow. Comes as 3 people were killed there and 12 hurt after a Russian missile attack nearby. Cal Perry is joining us now. And Cal, we'll start with that interview. This $55 million coming at an important time. It's cold where you are, right? Like that happens. It is winter. And Ukrainians, the citizens, the innocent people who live there, need help to stay warm.
Yeah, and so many of them, millions, don't have shelter, don't have hot water, don't have heating because their houses have been bombed or destroyed. And it is cold here. It's a thing I was not fully aware of before I came here in February. It gets bitterly cold here, and it's going to get colder in the east as well. And that's why people think that the lines in the east and the fighting is going to sort of become stagnant. And that's why Ukraine is pushing so hard, so fast. For Samantha Power, the USAID director, administrator, this is an existential threat for the United States. I had a chance to walk with her in Maidan Square and ask her, why is it so important that Americans continue to fund this and continue to back Ukraine? Here's a little bit of what she had to say.
What's at stake here is the question of whether a large power can invade a neighbor and get away with it. The essence of the values that define civilization are at stake in this conflict.
And so you have $9.89 billion pledged by USAID here in Ukraine. And as you mentioned, that $55 million basically to winterize parts of this country. We have a little bit more details on that. We can throw up a graphic. And it is the obvious things, right? It's pipes, it's hot water, it's power generators, it's delivering, as you can see, their heating assistance to 7 million Ukrainians in 19 regions. All of this, Hallie, is assuming that things don't get worse and that there's not more damage. But the reality is, of course, the attacks are continuing across the country.
Well, including Zaporizhzhia, right? One of the places Russia claimed to have control over, et cetera, claimed to have annexed. There's now people that are still getting pulled out of the debris left from there. How does this fit into the bigger picture on the evolution of the Russian escalation of this war?
Well, look, I think what's happening, and certainly when you talk to defense officials and you're looking there at some aftermath of this attack, is they're worried that this is Russia lashing out, right? That this is Russia losing ground in the east and in the south on the battlefield, and so they're striking civilian targets. Now, President Zelensky tonight said about this attack that they struck this apartment building, they waited for rescuers to arrive, and they struck it again. That is eerily similar to what we saw carried out in Aleppo, in Syria. Time and time again, we would see targets hit, we'd see rescuers come to those targets, and then hit again. It's a way of trying to break the back of a civilian population, Hallie.
Cal Perry, live for us there overseas. Cal, you're doing great work. You continue to do so. I'm glad you brought your jacket. Stay warm. Thank you. And just a few hours ago, a jury of 6 men and 6 women were sworn in for the civil trial against Kevin Spacey. Look at this. You can see Spacey here. You're about to see him showing up to U.S. District Court in downtown Manhattan earlier today. You think anybody got a picture of him? Oof. It's been 5 years since actor Anthony Rapp publicly accused Spacey of sexual abuse. And what you can tell, it's an incredibly high-profile civil trial. This alleged incident happened in 1986 when Rapp was just 14 years old. Spacey would have been 26 or 27 at the time. Rapp says Spacey made unwanted sexual advances when the two were at a party in Manhattan. Spacey denies those allegations. Remember, Rapp was one of the first people to bring allegations against the celebrity in the early days of the Me Too movement. Ron Allen is joining us now with more from Lower Manhattan. What is Anthony Rapp seeking here, Ron?
Some $40 million and to hold Kevin Spacey accountable, he says. We heard opening arguments from both sides today after jury selection lasted a few hours this morning. And Rapp's attorney are basically portraying him as at the time, in 1986 now, a shy, nerdish 14-year-old boy from Illinois who is single. He has a single mother who was a nurse who was here in New York City living his dream of getting into the arts. He was in a show on Broadway, as was Kevin Spacey, who was about 26 or 27 when they met. And there are something of a friendship or association developed. And then as time went by, there was a party at Kevin Spacey's apartment that Rapp came to. And the way Rapp describes it, at some point he noticed that he was alone with Kevin Spacey in his bedroom, he says. He says that Spacey picked him up, described it as like a bride, like a groom picks up a bride and carries her over the threshold and put him on a bed. Then he felt the entire weight of Stacey's body on him, he says. And the attorneys insist that Spacey was doing all this for his own sexual gratification. On the other side, Kevin Spacey's attorneys basically said that Rapp is making this whole thing up, that none of this happened, that it's a complete fabrication, that he was jealous of Spacey, that he wanted attention, that he was trying to boost his career, and that's why he has fabricated this story. Rapp says that he came forward because he heard of other people making allegations, some of Harvey Weinstein's accusers, for example, and he wanted to say, he wanted to speak out because of what was going on. An interesting point. The attorneys made the point that that Rapp has said that this happened in Kevin Spacey's bedroom. However, there's the attorneys for Spacey are saying that they have plans, blueprints, pictures, other evidence that shows that there was no bedroom in Spacey's apartment at the time. It was a studio, adding to their argument that this never happened. So it's classically, basically a classic he said, with $40 million and Kevin Spacey's reputation at stake.
Ron Allen live for us there in Lower Manhattan. Ron, I'm sure we'll have updates in the days to come on that trial. Appreciate it. Coming up, some wild testimony in that Oath Keepers trial today. What a former member is saying about the group's leader and who he allegedly claimed to have been in touch with before January 6th. Plus, the Biden administration set to start screening people traveling from one country to the U.S. Why? Because of Ebola. More on that in our 5 Things. Guilty to seditious conspiracy, making him the first person, the first Proud Boy facing charges from January 6th to be convicted of this very serious charge, planning to oppose the United States government. That's what the charge is. It comes as a former member. It comes as, by the way, other defendants on trial for seditious conspiracy, the same charge. This group of Oath Keepers are on trial. Former member of that group on the far right testifying against Stewart Rhodes, who's the founder in the biggest January 6th trial so far, telling the jury Rhodes encouraged egging on violence against members of Antifa and Black Lives Matter, and says Rhodes claimed to have had a contact inside the Secret Service. All of it as the January 6th committee today is officially announcing their next hearing will be 1 week from today. Joining me now is Ken Delaney. So, Ken, let me take the umbrella of seditious conspiracy. It's not a charge we see a lot. It's not a charge that's nothing. It's a big deal, right? So talk to us about this Proud Boy and this guilty plea here.
Huge deal, Hallie. Seditious conspiracy is opposing the U.S. government by force. And this is the first Proud Boy to have pled guilty to that charge. And what's important is it appears he's going to be cooperating and testifying against his fellow Proud Boy members. And he's pleading guilty to conspiring with them to use force to try to overthrow the government or impede the government. And that becomes a really important witness, because right now we're going through the Oath Keepers seditious conspiracy trial. There will be another trial for these Proud Boys on the same charges. And while the prosecution will introduce emails and text messages and all kinds of evidence, there's nothing like a member of the conspiracy to come into court and tell the jury, here's what we agreed to do. Here's what they said on such and such a date. And that's what it looks like will happen with this witness. Now, we haven't seen that in the Oath Keeper trial that's ongoing right now yet, but it appears that we will, because there have been some Oath Keepers who have pled guilty as well to seditious conspiracy.
Talk to us about that trial, right? These Oath Keepers on the stand, as well as these Oath Keepers who are defendants, right? There are some Oath Keepers on the stand. One of them had recorded this call where the government said Rhodes outlined his plan to stop President Biden from taking office.
Yeah, that was remarkable. He basically said that, he wasn't on board with that. He grew increasingly alarmed as he was listening to this call, which happened shortly after the November election, where Stewart Rhodes was exhorting followers essentially that they needed to show President Trump that they were prepared to die to keep him in office. And this witness was like, I'm not in for that. And so, you know, it just, you know, we're only a couple days into this month-long trial, Hallie, and the prosecution has already presented an avalanche of evidence, you know, from these defendants in their own words, in text messages and recordings, showing that they wanted to use force to, you know, to try to prevent Congress from counting those votes on January 6th. It's very powerful. Now, again, we have not yet heard a member of the conspiracy coming in and saying that we agreed to do this, and we haven't heard the defense fully yet, so it remains to be seen. But right now, it looks like the prosecution has a very strong hand.
Ken Delanian, it's fascinating. Thank you so much. Let's get you over now to the 5 things our team thinks you should know about tonight. Number 1, police in California say they found the bodies of 4 family members who were kidnapped at gunpoint this week. A farm worker found them overnight, called the sheriff. Somebody's been taken into custody in critical condition after he apparently tried to kill himself. We still don't know of any motive in this case. Number 2, a man who pleaded guilty in the plot to kidnap Michigan Governor Gretchen Whitmer, sentenced today to time in federal prison, 4 years. Caleb Franks will get credit for the 2 years he's already been in custody. He was facing a max sentence of life behind bars, but prosecutors encouraged the judge to give him a break for testifying against other people who were allegedly involved in this whole plot against the governor, who you see here. Number 3, the U.S. is going to start screening people for Ebola if they've been in Uganda in the past few weeks. There is no approved vaccine for the strain that's spreading there right now. Ugandan officials say at least 9 people there have died since the country announced the Ebola outbreak last month. No cases right now in the U.S. Officials say this screening is really just a precaution. Number 4, more teens are vaping. 2.5 million middle and high school students say they've recently vaped, used an e-cig, according to the CDC survey taken this year. The CDC official said something else they found disturbing, that out of the kids who do vape, more than 1 in 4 of them vape every single day, not just occasionally. Number 5, more trouble for Yeezy. Adidas says it's reviewing its relationship with Kanye West. The two had partnered together on his Yeezy line, but lately West has been speaking out against the company and the CEO. Kanye West is clearly not happy about this Adidas move. He posted on Instagram saying, quote, F Adidas, I am Adidas. This, of course, after he wore a controversial White Lives Matter shirt, leading him to be heavily criticized for what a lot of folks viewed as a racist statement. A new lawsuit has been filed against British tabloid The Daily Mail. Prince Harry, Sir Elton John, Elizabeth Hurley, some other famous names filing the suit against Associated Newspapers, which publishes The Daily Mail, The Mail on Sunday, The Mail Online. The lawsuit alleges that this group of papers hired PIs, okay, to secretly put these little devices to eavesdrop inside people's cars and houses. It says they also requested bugging live private phone calls, paid off law enforcement for private information, and illegally got into some bank account information. Danny Savalos joins us now with more. Like, this is bananas, Danny, that if these allegations are true, right, huge breach of privacy. To stick bugs on somebody's line to try to get their bank account info, whether you're a celebrity or not, obviously it's not right.
It's unbelievable if true, and it would be a huge legal problem in a country, in a jurisdiction, which is already very favorable, more favorable to plaintiffs in defamation and libel cases and privacy type cases than the United States. In the UK, the burden is on the defendant in a defamation or a libel case, for example, to prove that what they said was true. That's very different from the United States, where a plaintiff has the burden to prove that a statement was false if they bring that kind of lawsuit.
This is not the first time for Prince Harry that he's filed a lawsuit against this group of papers.
He's not. And unsurprisingly, he's filed a number of them. Again, the jurisdiction makes the law very favorable. Even with somebody as high profile as the prince, he's in a jurisdiction in the UK that just makes these cases much more viable than in the United States. It's a system that is very similar to ours. We got our legal system from them, but with some remarkable differences. This is probably number 1 in the legal differences.
Danny Savalos, great breakdown. Thank you. Still to come here on the show, people in Thailand absolutely grieving today after the country's deadliest attack in history. What we know, what we're learning now about the victims of that horrific daycare attack coming up. Right now, it is early morning in Thailand, and as people wake up there, the country is waking up to a nightmare. Its deadliest mass attack in history, with somebody killing at least 38 people at a daycare center, 24 of them kids. Another 12 were hurt. And obviously, after it happened, you saw people just wrecked, right? Emotional, crying, hugging, just so difficult to think about as these folks are now living a nightmare. Thai police today say the attacker was a 34-year-old man who was also a former police officer. He'd been fired after getting arrested last year when he was found with meth. And after attack, they say he shot at people as he drove away before going home, where he killed his wife, his child, and then himself. Kaori and Joji is joining us now, and it is just, like we said, it's hell, right? I mean, it's hell here in Thailand. Some of these kids attacked were as young as 2 years old. What else do we know about this and what happened?
Absolutely horrific, Hallie. And just after lunchtime, a former policeman went on a rampage at a nursery. And you're talking about 2- and 5-year-olds. And many of them were taking a nap in there. And he used a 9mm pistol and a knife to kill 24 children and 12 adults. What we do know that the gunman was 34 years old. He was fired from the police force in Thailand, as you said, and he was carrying drugs at the time, meth. And he was in court today to face those drug charges. So after that court process, he came to pick up his own child at the nursery and fired his way into the building. And he kept shooting as he fled. When he got home, he shot his wife, his child, and then himself. I mean, these are toddlers, Hallie, truly heinous.
It's like so hard to talk about this, right, Corey? Because here in the United States, like, we've had horrific tragedies. It's awful, right? I mean, we've had them this year. You know, it is rare in Thailand to have something like this happen, right?
Yeah, it's the deadliest mass killing Thailand has ever seen by a lone perpetrator. There was a mass shooting about 2 years ago in Thailand that killed about 29 people. Gun violence, though, is higher in Thailand than in some other parts of Asia. But compared to the U.S., very, very rare in Thailand. But Thailand does have a problem with guns, and that is because it has a very, very long border. To the east, Laos; to the west, Myanmar. And that border is very, very porous. And there's been so much war ravaging in that area. This area has been very rife with an illegal arms trade because the border is so porous. And I think the other thing that's very sad about this incident is that in rural areas where this shooting took place, like it did today, mothers and fathers often have to leave the village to go to work in the big cities or abroad, and to have to leave their kids behind so that the grandparents can look after them. And so there are a lot of these nurseries in these villages. And I think that makes today's shooting all the more heart-wrenching.
Corey and Joji, thank you so much for bringing us the details on this awful story. Appreciate it. Coming up, student athletes in Florida expected to share some medical info or asked to share other medical info, including for female athletes, questions about their periods. That has parents and doctors sounding the alarm, but it's not just the questions themselves they're worried about. We're getting into how their data is stored in this post-Roe world for our original tonight. Stay with us. Tonight's original now with in-depth reporting on something we've been keeping an eye on. And this one comes to us from Florida, where student athletes are asked to share information on medical conditions like seizures, allergies, other kinds of things to compete in the state. But female athletes are also asked to disclose the timing of their menstrual cycles, as well as other info about their periods, leading parents and doctors to raise the alarm when a school district recently brought this information gathering to an online company, especially concerned about what this means in a world where Roe versus Wade no longer exists. Here's the deal. If you want to play school sports in Florida, state law says you've got to answer a bunch of medical questions.
I can understand why a coach or administrator of a school might need to know about an athlete's medical issues. That's certainly reasonable.
For female athletes, there are even more questions, optional but personal, including details about menstrual cycles, like when did you get your first period? When was your most recent period? And how much time passes usually between your periods? These questions aren't new, but in Palm Beach County, how the answers are being stored is. In August, the Palm Beach County School District signed a contract with Activate, a school sports tech firm, to help its teams manage student medical and other related data.
And that has some parents alarmed.
There's no need for it. It could be done another way through the school board. We don't have to even go to a third-party system. And I'm worried about her future, of course, in regards to, like, what are they doing with that?
The company says it doesn't sell student data, but it does allow sharing anonymous data unrelated to health for research purposes.
We very much respect parents' privacy rights.
But with a subpoena, the company acknowledges it could be obligated to share medical information with law enforcement. And in a post-Roe world, critics say storing reproductive health data with a third-party online platform could leave personal information vulnerable.
We're in a post-Roe world, and people are actively trying to take away additional women's rights. As an advocate for young women, I would just not want them to be giving away information they don't need to.
Congresswoman Sarah Jacobs is working to address those concerns, proposing a bill that would create a new national standard for reproductive medical data online.
What we are trying to do with the My Body, My Data Act is that we don't have any exceptions. So your reproductive and sexual health data cannot be shared without your express written consent, period, the end, no exceptions. And we think that's really important in states like Florida, like Texas, where we are starting to see this kind of data that could be used against people in these states where abortion is being criminalized.
Back in Palm Beach County, after some pushback from parents, the district updated its policy, once again allowing paper submissions of those medical forms. They say parents who don't want their kids' information stored with Activate have to reach out to the company directly to request that it be removed.
It shouldn't be on each individual person to figure out how to keep their data safe. This is some of our most sensitive and personal data, and it deserves the highest level of protection that the government can give.
And some now concerned about what the future holds.
If they did it with this medical information for right now, what's next?
The school district says this isn't their medical questionnaire. They're just following state law, adding that the Florida High School Athletic Association created the questionnaire. They say the district requested to have the menstruation questions removed, but so far the association and the state hasn't changed the form. We asked them about this issue. No response yet. NBC News covers hundreds of stories every day, and because you couldn't possibly read or watch or listen to them all, our bureau teams have done it for you. This is what they tell us is going down in their regions in a segment we call The Local. From our Northeast Bureau, a federal judge in New York is temporarily blocking parts of the state's new gun law, saying it's too strict. The judge said the state cannot ban people from carrying guns in places like the subway or Times Square, but it can keep the guns out of other places like schools. This law, remember, went into effect last month. From our D.C. Bureau, and maybe kind of our Southeast Bureau, Senator Ben Sasse is resigning. He's from Nebraska to become the next president of the University of Florida. The university seeming to confirm the news in the last hour, saying its search committee unanimously approved the Nebraska Republican. They expect him to take over by the end of the year. Senator Sasse's term isn't up until 2026, so in the meantime, Nebraska's governor will choose a replacement. There will also be a special later on. From our West Coast Bureau, LeBron James, angling for his post-play in life. His message to NBA Commissioner Adam Silver last night, he wants to own a team in Vegas if the league ever expands there. It's not the first time he sounded kind of interested in this. It is certainly, I think, probably the most direct appeal he's ever made, the most direct reference he's made to that. Taking his talents to Vegas. We'll see. When we come back, some people online have been speculating that roundup option when you check out at a store doesn't really go to charity. So is it like a big scam? Should you do it? Vicky Nguyen looked into it. That's our backstory. Time now to get the backstory, our behind-the-scenes look at how a story comes together and how it fits into our bigger picture. When you're at the grocery store checking out, I bet you've gotten that message saying, hey, do you want to round up your total to donate a few extra cents to charity? Like if you spent $9.53, you'd give the remaining 47 cents to charity. A lot of people say yes. Most of us say yes and round up their bill. Nearly 56% of us, according to one study. But online, some of the TikTokers that you see on your screen are saying, like, wait, maybe this is a scam. They're saying, wait a second, stores are taking advantage of the money you give. Or they're saying, hey, stores actually get a tax write-off for your donation through these various ways. So our Vicky Nguyen looked into that, whether that's actually the case. You want to know what charity and nonprofit experts told her? That it's all legit. And you could even get a tax deduction for it, as long as you keep all those receipts for the pennies here and the pennies there for when you do your taxes. Vicky is joining us now to talk about this reporting. Vicky, it's super interesting because this has been around for a while. And this is a story that everybody's talking about. I was just talking about it in the studio, like a couple minutes ago before the show. People saying, yeah, I used to do that, but I don't because I heard it was a scam, et cetera. Why is it that you decided to look into this?
That's exactly why, Hallie, because we wanted to debunk this information. As you said, it is legit, and charities benefit by the tens and hundreds of millions of dollars from those extra cents that come from rounding up. And we see it everywhere, right? Not only are you asked to round up, but sometimes it's like, hey, do you want to give $1 or $3 or $5? They make it as easy as possible at the point of sale because sometimes people don't think about donating. But when it's right in front of them, oh, they may say, you know what, the Boys and Girls Club or this PetSmart charity or, you know, the Walgreens Fund or what have you. And so we wanted to make sure people understood where their hard-earned money was going and that, yes, you can feel good about making that donation because it is going to a good cause. But I was so surprised by the videos that were made by people putting it out as fact, like, hey, the man is getting your money. Don't do this. They're getting the tax benefits.
They're taking advantage of your, they're taking advantage of your money, of your donation, because they deduct it.
It was wild to me to think that people thought that, but then that they were going and putting that information out on their platforms, in some cases getting millions of views. And so when we talked to the nonprofits and the charity experts, they were like, thank you, because we count on these donations and we don't want people thinking that their money isn't going somewhere where it counts.
What's also interesting is, like, when just to pull back the curtain, because that's what this segment is all about, when I first heard that you were working on the story, like, Vicky investigates this rounding up thing, I was like, oh, she's going to drop the hammer. She's going to tell me it's a scam, you know, because that's how a lot of these investigative stories go. Like, it's the bad news around. This is actually not bad news. Did that surprise you when you were reporting this out? That, like, oh, actually, this is a good thing that's happening. That's cool.
I assumed that it was a good thing because of the level of retailer where I was seeing these roundups. It's not happening at the little random store on the corner. I mean, when you have big name players, the Walmarts, the Acmes, the Krogers of the world who are doing this at the register, you know there's a paper trail. You know that this isn't something that's going to be easy for them to sweep under the rug. But what I will tell you, and you know this, Hallie, when you peel back the curtain, a lot of our best investigations come from the experiences that we just have IRL, in real life, right? We wonder, hey, is this legit or not? And during the past couple of years, things like colloidal silver, that was a big, heavily advertised nutritional supplement, right? And people were saying it could prevent you from getting COVID. We investigated that, and we definitely debunked it. It isn't a supplement that's recommended by anyone, and in fact, it can make you very sick. The same thing with people saying that, you know, certain kinds of masks were really going to restrict your oxygen flow. So often we are debunking that information, but this was a case where, no, actually, your donations are going where the retailers say your donations are going, and you benefit, the charities benefit. It's all on the up and up.
It's the opposite of debunking. You're like bunking it. You know what I mean? Because it's actually the correct thing. Yes. I know that one of the things you love to do is to give people, like, good old consumer news they can use, right? And that's the point with all these stories you're talking about. So I'm going to give you a chance. Lay it out for us, girl. What should we know?
Yeah, you know what? I even think that we put together a little graphic so you can see, look, if you are ever wondering about where your hard-earned money goes and if it's going to a worthwhile cause, Charity Watch, Charity Navigator, you can even go to irs.gov to enter that information and see if that is a trustworthy organization.
It is good advice, especially ahead of Giving Tuesday coming up next month. Vicky, thank you. It's so good to see you. Great, great reporting. Loved watching that story. Thanks for bringing us behind the scenes. You can watch more of her reporting on the show. She anchors NBC News Now daily from noon to 2 Eastern. NBC News Daily, we should say, right here on NBC News Now and on your local NBC station. That does it for us this hour. More here tomorrow. Same time, same place. We're glad you're with us. Coverage picks up right now.
Thanks for watching our YouTube channel. Follow today's top stories and breaking news by downloading the NBC News app.